Okay, so this is legal research. It is for week, I think 11. It'll be on your the title of this, so don't worry about that. You'll know what week it is. Okay. So we are now on chapter 14, back to basics. We've been talking about how to research. We've been talking about research strategies, making sure that you are covering all of your bases. Now we are getting into the basics of how to write properly. This is going to be a little bit of like an English class. I know you're in college. I know. What do you mean we have to talk about prepositional phrases? Because if you write well, you actually stand out in the world. Most of the people out there in the world can't write. They're terrible at it. We're so used to texting with the letter U for you, or UR for your, or NBD for no big deal, that I actually see that in papers that get turned in. We have to learn how to unlearn all of these shortcuts and grammatically incorrect ways we have been using social media so that we can go back to what you learned in 9th grade English class, which is subject predicate, make sure your verb matches your noun, make sure you have proper spelling, make sure you have proper punctuation. These are important. And believe it or not, when you can do it well, you distinguish yourself from the rest of the world that can't. So we're going to bump up those skills a little bit in chapter 14. So chapter 14 talks about just the mechanics of writing. And when we talk about mechanics, we're talking about nuts and bolts, right? That's what a mechanic does, deals with nuts and bolts on your vehicle. Nuts and bolts of writing: grammar, spelling, punctuation. Those are the nuts and bolts of writing well. Grammar. And by the way, did you hear what I just said? Writing well. Not writing good. Not writing well. Well is an adverb. Okay? How are you writing? I'm writing well. You've got to make sure that you know what words in a sentence go with other words in a sentence. So your book starts with grammar do's and don'ts. Subject verb agreement is the first one. And it gives you correct and incorrect ways of handling things. Now, what do I mean by agreement of subject and verb? I mean if you have a singular noun, a singular pronoun, a singular subject of a sentence, your verb better be singular, right? I hear people all the time saying, he do this. What? Are you 2? Because that's how 2-year-olds talk. And you're certainly not going to write that way. He is singular. The singular of the verb to do is does. He does. They do. That's a very common thing that I hear all the time. And you got to cut it out. You have to speak properly and you have to write properly. And by the way, if you speak improperly, your writing will reflect it. It'll be much more of an effort to write properly if you speak improperly. Work on it. And I've had students who will say to me, well, the people I hang out with, they talk that way, and then I talk like that. And you know what I say? Find other people to hang out with. Those people aren't helping you. Bump it up. Okay? If you want to be successful, writing skills, speaking skills will zoom you to the top. If you don't want to go to the top, then don't bother. There'll be other people who can write and speak properly. They'll take your place. So there's your little tough love. If you don't want to learn this, that's fine. Somebody else will. and they'll get the promotion, they'll get the job. It's just that simple. Okay? I had one student who told me once, well, you know, these rappers, they don't have to. That's right. And? Are you at ETI to become a rapper? Because if you are, you're in the wrong place. So how about we focus on the skills that you said you wanted to perfect so you can be successful in the career that you are paying a heck of a lot of money to train to do. It's just that simple. Okay? So subject, verb. The verb to be is actually a verb. I am, you are, they are. The verb am, is, are, A-R-E, that's all part of the verb to be. Okay? This is another area where I hear a lot of problems. First of all, we don't use the verb to be in a sentence like he be going. Get that out of your vocabulary. He is going. They are going. Nobody be doing anything. So we don't use the verb to be that way. All right? The example that we have in the book is the judge and jury were unpersuaded by Smith's testimony. Now, the incorrect way they have it written is the judge and jury was unpersuaded by Smith's testimony. Okay, was is singular. He was. They were. That's the way that you test whether you have the right form of your verb is do a singular pronoun with it, do a plural pronoun with it. If you can put he was and it makes sense, then it's singular. If you can put they were, well, then it's plural. Now, the point of this exercise in the text is whenever you have two nouns in the subject of your sentence connected by a conjunction and, it's no longer singular, it's plural. And so that plural, that collective plural noun deserves a plural verb. Don't shortchange it with a singular one. Okay? Now, if you have a connector but it's not a conjunction, if you like but or nor, well then it's singular, right? Neither defendant nor his attorney were prepared. Sounds good, doesn't it? Because you've got the defendant and his attorney, right? Neither one was prepared. Both of them together, right? Because the magic word and is what makes the subject plural. If you have or, nor, or but, it's one or the other. Therefore, it's singular. Okay? So the correct way to write that sentence would be neither the defendant nor his attorney was prepared. Okay? That's just a little thing that happens all the time in writing. You want to make sure that it's correct. Your book goes through also another tricky thing, which is everyone or each or somebody. Are those plural or are those singular? Well, let's go through. Everyone in the courtroom were seated. Were. They were. Plural. Everyone is one. It's a collective. Okay? We're taking everybody in the room, putting them in one basket, and we're naming that basket everyone. So there's only one basket. So it's singular. Everyone in the courtroom was seated, right? Again, let's use our pronoun test. He was, they were. Everyone is one collective. It is not, there's no and in there at all. So we want to make sure that that is singular. Okay? Each of these incidents involves a consumer who mistakenly purchased one product when he intended to purchase another. Each, again, is a collective noun. Each individual. There's no word and in there. It's not going to be plural. It's singular. The same thing with somebody. Somebody forgot to file his or her papers. Singular. Okay? We have more collective nouns. Now these are collective words that are kind of vague, right? But we have other kinds of collective. And by collective I mean we're taking a bunch of people, but we're putting them in one basket. So they're collected into one basket and it's singular. Okay? The court, the jury, board of directors, those are all collective, singular nouns. Right? Board of directors has met. The court is discussing. The jury has adjourned. Those are all singular verbs. Why? Because we're dealing with singular collective nouns. Okay? Let's see. The next thing I want to go over is prepositional phrases. What the heck is a prepositional phrase? Well, a prepositional phrase is always started with a preposition. And I'm not trying to be smart when I tell you this. If you don't remember what a preposition is and what the list of prepositions are, please go to Grammar Rock on YouTube. I'm not trying to be smart. I'm not trying to talk down to you. It is simply the best way to refresh your recollection on what a preposition is. Watch the 1.5, 2-minute video on prepositional phrases and it'll come back to you. There are, several prepositions that we use all the time: with, when, where. Those are prepositions. And usually then there'll be a preposition and then a little phrase that follows. That's a prepositional phrase. Okay? Prepositional phrases generally will not be the subject of a sentence. They will modify whatever the subject is. So you want to make sure your prepositional phrase correctly has a singular object of the prepositional phrase or a plural object of the prepositional phrase. You're modifying whatever's in the sentence. Okay? Another thing that we want to stay away from grammar-wise are sentence fragments. Okay, a sentence fragment is where you might have a perfectly good subject, but there's no verb or no predicate. Or you might have a perfectly good verb or predicate and no subject. You've got to have both. Lots of times people will add on what they think is a sentence, and it's really not. So the example in your book is, I gained 2 valuable lessons. That's a complete sentence. First, the importance of being bilingual. Second, the need to understand a different culture. Those last 2 sentences, they're not sentences. There's no subject, there's no predicate. Okay? Again, if you are having trouble with what is a subject and what is a predicate, what's a noun and a verb, what modifiers are, I encourage you to go to, there's a website that I will put in your assignments that is a writing lab. It's not owl. I can't remember it. But I'll put it into your assignments so that you can link to it. Because if you don't understand how sentences are put together, there's no way you can do this. Because you don't know what's a subject and what you don't know what's a predicate. So keep that in mind. If you're really struggling with that, I'm going to refer you to a website. Okay? Run-on sentences are also a problem. Again, if you are writing a sentence and it fills a whole paragraph, probably too long. And that's what we really mean by a run-on sentence. We all know people who will start talking and you're like, when are you going to stop? A sentence is just one idea. If you've got more than one idea in a sentence, too long, run-on sentence. Chop it up. Different ideas go in different sentences. That's the whole idea of a period when we put together a sentence, right? You start with an idea and you end the idea with the period. And then you go on to the next one. Okay? So be aware that you can cram too much stuff into one sentence. And then nobody knows what you're talking about. Modifiers. Okay? Modifiers are things like, well, they are adjectives and adverbs or prepositional phrases. They are supposed to clarify what you're saying. So if you read a sentence and you're like, not really sure what that means, probably has too many modifiers or the modifiers are in the wrong place. And that's a problem. Okay? There's a confusing example. I really love that the book doesn't say right, wrong. It says confusing. He saw a note on the table that was blue. Which was blue, the note or the table? Blue needs to be closer to whatever word it's modifying. Okay? So it could be he saw a blue note on the table or he saw a note on the blue table. Ah, okay, now we know what's blue. That clarified or enhanced the sentence. But if you want to keep him guessing, you can write, he saw a note on the table that was blue. Just to keep him guessing. Okay? All right. Your book goes through pronouns also. Now I'm going to be completely politically incorrect. I'm going to tell you, as I suck on a piece of ice, that if you're talking about a guy, it's he. It's not they. Okay? If you're talking about a girl, it's she, not they. And if you're talking about an inanimate object, it's it. I'm going to tell you, out in the woke world, everybody can have a preferred pronoun. If you're trying to persuasively argue a point in court, it does you no good to blur and be less clear in your writing. There's really no space for that in legal writing. We want to be clear. We want to be persuasive. If you are using the word they to talk about a woman, that's confusing. You're not hitting the mark. And the reader, the judge, is going to spend half of his or her time trying to figure out what in the heck you're talking about. That's not really the best way to be persuasive, is it? Okay? I don't care what your political views are. I don't care if you think you can have political pronouns. When you're doing legal writing, specifics. He, she, it, singular. If you're talking about plural, more than one it, them. If it, or we are not going to use the word they for one individual. Don't do it. It's wrong. Okay? All right. There are plenty of examples in here, and I'm going to actually assign you a few of them for the mechanics of grammar, but let's move on to punctuation. When we're doing commas in punctuation, we use them in specific instances. If I am writing an informal letter, not a business letter, okay? If I'm writing a note to Grandma saying thank you for the Christmas gift, dear Grandma, comma. Okay? Now, if I'm in a business letter, I'm not going to use a comma. But for using commas correctly, comma, after the greeting, dear whomever, comma. Only for informal letters. If we are listing numbers, if we are doing dates, we need to make sure we have the comma in. And a lot of this is just common sense, right? Today's date is, let's say, January 2nd, comma, 2022. Okay, you know, the reader knows that there is a break between the number that we're putting for the date of the month and then the 4 digits for the year. It is a break. That's why we put it there. If I'm doing a number that's 4,182, I'm going to put a comma after 4,000. Every third digit, I'm going to put a comma. It helps the reader. Much easier to read 4,000, what did I say, 841, whatever the number was, with the comma in there. I don't have to count the numbers back. Oh, that's thousands. Okay? If we put the comma every third number, then it helps the reader. That's really what writing is about, being clear and helping the reader. Okay? If we have an introductory phrase, okay, according to the plaintiff's testimony, comma, the car was traveling west on the street at the time of the accident. Nevertheless, comma, the defendant failed to comply with the terms of his agreement. A good rule of thumb for this is if you have a question about whether you need a comma at the beginning of a sentence, take a breath. Read it, and if you take a breath, that's where the comma goes. Okay? If I have a list of non-essential words, I'm going to put a comma there. Okay? Apostrophes. Apostrophes are tough. Whenever there is ownership, you're going to have an apostrophe. The girl's coat, apostrophe S. The shareholder's ballot, apostrophe S. Okay? If I have a plural word with an S on the end of it, the apostrophe goes after the S. So the girl's coat, which is GIRL apostrophe S, means singular. The girl's coats, GIRLS apostrophe, means there are plural coats and plural girls. Okay? What if the word itself is plural? Children. Children is a plural word, right? We don't say childs for plural of children. Of one child is not childs, it's children. It's a plural word alone. You already know that that's plural. There's no S for me to put in an S apostrophe, all right? So it's going to be apostrophe S. When the word itself is in and of itself standalone, a plural word, and there's no S on the end of it, you're going to put apostrophe S. Okay? For most words that are plural, you're going to put S or ES on the end of them. Okay? Another use for apostrophes is when we have a contraction. A contraction is where we have two words, we're shortening them into one. So did not becomes didn't. What's the missing word, or the missing letter? Well, the O and not, right? That's where the apostrophe goes. The apostrophe is the placeholder for the letter that we're taking out to shorten the word. Okay? Does not becomes doesn't. Okay, does not. Where does the apostrophe go? Well, where the missing O in not is, and that's where the apostrophe goes. Okay? It's. It is or it has. Either way, we're taking off the beginning of our second word in that and putting an apostrophe as the placeholder. Okay? Colons and semicolons. Oh my gosh. Colons are what we use, and a colon is 2 dots. Okay? Colon is what we use when we write a business letter after the salutation. Dear Mr. Smith, colon. Now remember, Grandma, thanks for Christmas, comma, not a business letter. A business letter, Dear Mr. Smith, not a comma, a colon. Okay? We also use colons when we are following it with a list. Okay? I want you to do the following, colon. Boom, 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 boom. Don't have to do that, but that's a good way of telling the reader, hey, there's a list coming. Okay? And if I'm introducing a quote, and it's a longer quote, not just one line, but maybe a paragraph that you're quoting, a lot of people will put a colon in there. You don't have to, but you can. Okay? I prefer not to use semicolons, which is a dot with a comma under it, if you wish to read that section. Quotation marks go around anything that is not your thought. Period. Parentheses. Parentheses are not something that we use a lot in legal research and writing. It's kind of like an explanation. But again, when you're doing legal research and writing, it's not like we need to whisper something. And that's how I always think of what goes in parentheses. You know, he went to the store, in parentheses, because his wife told him to. Right? We don't need to whisper those kinds of things when we do legal research. So stay away from those, as well as dashes, exclamation marks, hyphens. These are all things when it comes to legal writing that we want to stay away from. Why? Because that's a much more colloquial way of writing. It's a much more laid back, non-formal, informal way of writing. When you're starting to throw in exclamation points, right? It's not like I'm texting somebody, right? It's my daughter's birthday today. I texted her, happy birthday, exclamation point with a bunch of emojis. We don't do that when we're writing legal briefs for the court. Okay? We don't put in there, hey judge, glad you liked my argument, exclamation point. No, we don't do that. We are very formal when we write. Okay? As we go through, you'll see we're not even going to say, you know, my argument is, or I believe that. The court doesn't care. What's the court care of what you believe? It's the cases. It's the authorities. So all of your personal interjection, it's really not persuasive. It's not persuasive, you don't throw it in. That's really the golden rule. Okay? All right. I think that gets us to the end of this chapter. I've got several assignments for you dealing with grammar and spelling and punctuation. I know, it feels like 9th grade. I'm sorry. I'm going through it quickly because I don't want to insult you, but these are important things for you to understand. And again, I cannot stress this enough. If you are speaking incorrectly, you are making your job as a writer 10 times harder. Why? Why do you want to do that? Do it right the first time. When you speak it, speak properly. When you write it, it will come naturally. Okay? All right, make sure you do your assignments, and if you have any questions, as always, email me, text me, get a hold of me. I can meet you at the school. We can have a Zoom meeting, whatever it is that will help you. But you have to let me know. Thanks.